Nicoletta, and I'll be your EMC for this afternoon. So we started this morning by asking how can Europe actually control the technologies that govern our lives? We then explored alternative European ways of doing tech. Now, as we look ahead, it's time to ask ourselves, how can Europe move from adapting to leading? We'll explore this in our final plenary session, Designing the Brussels Effect 2.0. Please welcome our speakers today, Anne Sandel Nielsen, Sana Afoyes, Gilberto Mauricio, and Leonardo Quattrucci. And moderating this session is Javier Espinoza. Please.
Great. Thank you so much for being here at this late stage in the day. Always get the bad timings, either right before lunch or before the coffee break. So this is after the coffee break, but before the end of the day. So I'm trying to figure out the level of energy in the room. But no pressure to my panelists to keep you entertained and engaged. And as I was preparing to this panel, as I do often, I've been having a conversation with this city for the last 6 years. I am very pleased to see that people are trying new formats and new ways of engaging. I have to say, I've never had such an eclectic group of people in my panel with hidden talents like singing, etc.
I might just break out in a song.
But just to tease out and get us ready to start our conversation today, as you saw outside, there's this game and there's 3 different pillars, and some of you put some balls in the different categories to the question of EU and what we should prioritize. And the first column is on innovation, the second one is on rules, and the third one is on values. And it was not surprising to me that rules had the least amount of balls, and innovation was pretty much at the same level as values. And that's just a short introduction to get us to the question of the Brussels Effect 2.0, because we have been discussing, many of us today here, that there's a bit of fatigue about talking about the Brussels Effect and what it's doing. And so one big open question is to whether you think that Brussels is still relevant, that we still have that, and if we're losing steam, how do we get our mojo back?
Thank you, Javier. I don't think the Brussels effect is dead as such, but it's definitely changing. We cannot deny that the global share of the European economy is shrinking. And well, we cannot just take our influence for granted. And I think there's also this realization within the EU institutions now that we need to be able to tell what the EU is actually offering to third countries. This summer, the EEAS and the Euro Commission came out with a communication, with a joint communication on the international digital strategy, where they mention a European tech business offer. And I think this is really the attempt to stir up the debate on whether or how the EU can lead in some areas in the future.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Sana?
I mean, I think Brussels is and still will play the role of the hub of Europe. I think we are in very strategic location. Our politics maybe is not onto the point at the moment, but I think on European level, I think we need to question our leadership. Where do we want to go? Where do we want to take our countries further? I think we are puzzled between the the international competition, because we have a certain legislation that I actually like here in Europe that doesn't go along with, I would say, the rules of competition on international level when you look at the example of the US and China. So I think it's a great opportunity for Europe to question what are the changes we need to put in place into becoming in that competitive actor without losing the values that we have in Europe. Because at the end of the day, what makes Europe different is actually the values that we stand for. So I'd rather be in a region where we actually put policies that controls technology rather just being greedy into the revenues that technology can make and be lost into that tech power game.
Interesting. Gilberto?
I think we believe that we are supposed to dominate a beast. I think the EU's focus is often the world is wild, the world is dangerous, and we must control it through regulation, which isn't per se a bad thing. But what are we cultivating? What are we building up together? And how are we making use of regulation in a way that actually leads us to creating something that we want to live in? I think the challenge that the EU is facing today is that we focus so much on this idea of how do we make sure everything is perfectly controlled, that we've forgotten that we have to imbue what we create with the values that we have. I think the opportunity for the Brussels effect is in starting to think about not just tech regulation, but about governance. How can we govern the policies and the opportunities of the future and build things that are foundational and instrumental for the utopia that we are dreaming of or hoping for.
What is this utopia?
I mean, I'm from the Caribbean, so I can't say. But I would say the European values, like this idea of democracy, this idea of cooperation, this idea of that we have rule of law and human rights, is something that we all claim to hold on to, right? These European values, however, there is an incoherence. There is a disharmony between what we say and what we do. And this disharmony is the cause for the paralysis that we are facing today. And if we don't get it together and, get on one page about what is it that we really want and where we want to go, we're always going to stay stuck. We're stuck. And how do we get unstuck?
Leonardo?
So I think we tend to over-index on what needs to be done rather than how to do it. And I want to introduce the idea of common sense. So common sense is the ability to proportion virtually unlimited goals with a limited set of resources. And if you want to lead any successful strategist or strategy, it needs to be able to proportion limited means to unlimited ends. I think what we're seeing is in Europe, and not just EU institutions, is a growing number of tasks and goals that governments need to attain, but a decreasing capacity to attain them. I'll give you an example. Over the last 10 years, the number of digital policies that we passed at EU level has increased. Has the number of engineers increased? It hasn't. Has the number of people staffing the DGs that issue these digital policies? It hasn't. And so I think any conversation we have, realistically, needs to focus on the institutional mathematics of how you deliver progress. And that is three things: who you hire and how you hire it, what you buy and how you buy it, and how you diffuse existing technologies. Because historically, when the US overtook the UK in terms of GDP growth, they were not inventing new stuff more than the UK. They were just diffusing it better across industries. And so in the long term, it's not technology stacks that compete, but it's societies and their abilities to adapt to technological change.
That's really good. And to this point, and I think to be more philosophical before we get into the substance, there seems to be this tension between the race to the latest technology and keeping the values and the governance in Europe. How do you, I mean, it seems to be a very difficult circle to be squared.
Indeed. I don't think that Europe should try to compete on every front. We really need to pick our our battles and find our strength and find out where our values align, essentially. So I agree with you there.
And how do you see that happening? If we're not going to have the biggest companies, how do we compete?
Well, then we need to select what we are good at, essentially. We should focus on strategic niches, like semiconductors, for example, or take it sovereign cloud, 6G networks. Where we are leading is also in quantum technologies, for one, from quantum computing to quantum communication. We need to be able to say, this is what we're good at. Now we need to keep that research and be able to scale, be able to retain the companies here in Europe. That's essentially what it's all about.
And Sana, I know that you're on the ground leading a group of female entrepreneurs in Belgium only, or more widely, I guess, as well, people coming from other parts.
So what we do is Womanpreneur is an organization that trains women in tech and entrepreneurship. So we are active in Belgium, but also in 25 countries globally. We have our own center in Schaerbeek in Gare du Nord, where we train women in actually tech sectors.
I listened to you speaking about that yesterday, and it was interesting that it's in Gare du Nord. Right? Why there? I mean, it's not a very obvious place.
Yeah.
And every time I pass the Gare du Nord, I run.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that you selected that as.
Yeah, because I was very selective into even like the way we created the center. I wanted something that says, here we are, we exist as women, and I wanted to create a space where, is accessible for women that we target. We target marginalized women, women who come from certain difficult neighborhoods. So Schaerbeek is actually the commune where we have the highest number of women unemployed from migrant origin. So for us to exist there is to say, here we are, women can lead also and can have access and have control over Schaerbeek, but also to be that space that is accessible to these women, to have this safe space where they can come, be trained, be supported, and just rule the world, let's say. So what we do concretely is that we train women in tech sectors, in cybersecurity, AI, but also in different tech jobs. And we help them to find internships, and then we support them for 1 year to find a job at tech companies we collaborate with. What we want as our vision is not only that women consume tech, we want women to create tech. We want women to lead tech. We want to see women in leadership positions in tech. I mean, if you look into statistics, only 25% of women work in tech sectors. And if you see exactly the positions that they are occupying, they are sales people. So they are not the ones creating technology. And then when you see into the leadership position, we have less than 20%. So what we want to see as our vision at Womanpreneur is to create the biggest pool of talent, not only in Belgium, but in all the countries where we work in, the biggest pool female talent in tech, women who are creating tech and leading tech. Because if you see on a daily basis, I mean, the woman in this room can relate. This is an example I gave yesterday. Look at your phone. Like most of the phones, especially Apple products, they are designed by engineers, and we know that 90% of those engineers are men. So when they're working on any product, they're testing on themselves. But there is something that very biologically speaking, very obvious, is our hands as women are small in comparing to men. So what's happening is that we are buying a very expensive product, and then we tend to break that product. That's what's happening with me. So what we have to do is we need to buy a gadget or a case in order to hold the phone. So what's happening is that we as women, we need to buy more, so we need to consume more. And let me remind you that 70% of women worldwide are poor. So what's happening is that I'm buying a product that is already expensive, but I have to buy something else to actually enjoy the experience. So I'm pushed to buy more and to consume more, and I'm going to become more poorer in the future. But what would have happened had we had a very inclusive bunch of engineers and designers who are actually putting in place different tech products that, represent the needs of everyone. This is just a very small example of the different sectors, and I can give a lot of examples if I am allowed to. And,
No rules, you can...
I can, all right, perfect. Guys, are you ready?
We're not in the EU anymore.
Well, we are, the EU is involved, huh? It's about product consumption, so we're all concerned. Let me talk about, we thought AI is going to change our lives, especially when in the health sector. We all believe that, it's going to make everything easier. But let me remind you that technology is a tool. It is created by us humans, okay? We have not been replaced yet by robots. So everything we consume around, it's based on the biases that we also have. So in the UK, for example, 10,000 women lose their lives every day because they have been misdiagnosed by an AI platform on heart attacks, because women have completely different symptoms comparing to men. And therefore, the AI tools just collect data from, from us, like from the doctors, that somehow for so long have treated the symptoms in a similar way. And we all know that in the medical sector, women's bodies have been really put on the side because for so long, and I think since Aristotle, we believe that the man's body was the reference to actually understand all the medical issues of humans. So technology is just replicating our own biases, and we need to be very aware of that. And at Womanpreneur, we try to make sure that we prepare women and the next generation of women to be creating technology, leading technology.
Excellent, and I like this as a very concrete example, your network that you're developing as an example that goes beyond rules and actual concrete action. And I'm going to ask you more about it in a while. But I'm curious to hear from you, Gilberto. We talked about this idea of the Internet Commons. Can you tell us what that is and how this relates to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the development...
And just by the way, just a reminder that we have a QR code for those who want to ask questions. I get them on the iPad, and I'll be reading them out later.
I think when we look at the history of the internet or of the tech stacks in general, we see that a lot of it was birthed by the work of volunteers, by the work of academics, by the work of people exploring and discovering things. The Internet Commons is the foundation, is the base of all of the technology that we experience and use today. But the Internet Commons is also heavily under threat. It's all being bought out. The values that imbue technological industries nowadays are much more extractivist, much more very hungry, and they devour everything that they touch. And those are the companies that are winning. Those are the companies that are growing. So when we speak about things like competitiveness, is that the competition we want to be playing with? Is that the competition that is unique to our identity? Who are we trying to compete with? And
do you see European companies even competing in that space?
I mean, they can't, because that's not who we are. And so a lot of them are pushing themselves to be bought up by American companies because that's where the money is, because that's where the very extreme buyouts are coming out, the billion-dollar funding that is then being jacked up into the stock market, and then the choo-choo train goes up, and the prices keep on going. But you also see the outcome, right? You see the democracy is heavily under threat by social media companies that have algorithmic bias, that are messing, through astroturfing, messing with the political leanings of individuals. So when it comes to the fact about internet, about the way the internet is right now, it's in a very unhealthy place. And who we are as Europeans, at least in this utopic dream that I spoke about a bit, is that we are people that heavily value democracy, we value collective cooperation, we value taking care of each other, we value knowledge creation. So what if the internet future for our continent was one that focused on building these decentralized fundamental tools that are needed for change. One of the projects that I'm working on is called Bread Cooperative, and we're building solidarity-based economic systems and tools and funds using decentralized technologies like blockchain. And the purpose is to create endowments for communities, that communities can run themselves, that they can deploy themselves. What if Europe started in their policy making and in their money, because we're very cheap as a continent sometimes, and because we're so reluctant to give out and to invest in what we truly want, that we spend so much more time and effort into protecting what we have. But sometimes the leap of faith is necessary for us to lean into who we want to be and who we are becoming, instead of being fearful of what we have to lose. I think the door is open. Do we want to step in, or do we want to sit down and stay panicking?
Very good. Leonardo,
Oh, what's the question?
tell us. I was hoping you would react to.
Yeah, no, I can, because I think there are some things that we agree with, but some things I fundamentally disagree with. One of which is, which door is open? I think we're becoming the world of yesterday. European companies get bought by US companies, not because they're greedy, but because they don't have an alternative. Yeah. So yesterday, the Commission launched a scale-up fund, but we don't even have a single entity through which you can create a startup in Europe. So I think there's discourse polarized around the false dichotomy between values and competition. And in fact, there is a polarity by which you win a race by becoming fitter, because being optimistic on your values without fitness is delusion. And so what we need to do is to invest both in a competitive market, and there are very clear things to do, right? I think decentralized technologies are one model, but it shouldn't exclude other models that, by creative destruction, right? That's what the Nobel Prize for Economics this year showed by Europeans, that by creative destructions, you replace old industries to regenerate growth. And in fact, the idea of growth, and this is for me, the faltering of the growth model in Europe is a bankruptcy of its market for ideas. Because the idea of growth came between the 1500s and the 1700s from a group of Europeans called the Republic of Letters. Intellectuals that said they had irreverence towards establishment and affirmed new values of prosperity. And that useful knowledge became the Industrial Revolution. We have lost the culture of growth and the imagination to say, how do we affirm our own model? I think that's why we're stuck in this polarity between defending our values or competing. And instead, I think there's a culture of re-engineering that needs to happen, where we say, we compete because of our values.
You didn't know the question, but you had a perfect answer. Thank you.
Well, you sent it to me earlier.
You're not supposed to tell them.
Good preparation.
Can I respond?
Yeah. No, I think let's stay on this idea of culture. Yes, please respond, and then I want to.
I don't disagree with you. I think, that's why I said we're cheap. We are not good in investing and cultivating and growing what we have in a timely way. Everything takes so long, and it doesn't have to, but that's because we are not embedding. Values are not just random things that we say, right? They're not just, oh my gosh, yeah, European values, it's people love us for that. Values have to do with how we coordinate actions and how we create regulations, and how do we organize companies and organizations within our own communities. If we value innovation, then we're going to cultivate that by creating ecosystems that invest and grow it to maturity, and that don't push everybody to go to the US. I'm from Curacao. A friend of mine, so Curacao is a part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. But a lot of the startups that come from there, they all go to the US for funding, because it's almost impossible to get access to Dutch funding. Or even people that live in the Netherlands, startups that clearly contribute to EU sovereignty or autonomy, whatever we want to call it, are moving to the US because they get access to funding there that is quicker and much more timely, and they're not bogged down in the continuous paperwork that requires 9 months of waiting time. So I agree with that, but what I mean when it comes to the comments is that these are the foundations for the new internet that we want to build, for these new technologies. So we don't have to think about what is happening now. We're not just competing against the US now, we're competing against what will happen in 10 years. So we need to start laying the foundations for the future, and you can only do that by creating a strong internet commons now, because those are the things that have driven innovation in the past.
What is exactly creating a strong internet commons? Can you flesh this idea out?
It means investing in decentralized projects. It means investing in academic proposals and communities that can code stuff. It means people having access to the GPUs that they need. It means people having access to the computing that they need to be able to run experiments.
We have already supercomputers in Europe, like the biggest and
Yeah,
largest.
but we're still cutting. We're cutting funding on education domestically, left and right. Like universities are struggling to get funding. We can't even attract American scholars that are now getting kicked out by Trump because we don't provide enough money. We don't provide enough payment. Housing is too expensive. Like, guys, like, these are real issues that connect to, you know, these are the things, the conditions that we create in order for us to be successful. We're not doing that.
I have, yeah, can I think you mentioned the competition with the US. I think in the upcoming years, the competition will not be even with the US. I think both the US and Europe will have to compete with China. China has an ambition to be the leading economy worldwide. And that comes with also geopolitical power. And the thing is, we are so unfamiliar with the policies, with the culture, with China as a whole. So Europe is threatened, and that's the reality of things. And it's left with a lot of challenges, but with a lot of questions as well. Where do we, you know, what is our plan? Where are we going in the future? When you are confronted, like, you know, with the US, there are certain, you know, democratic process, there are certain, you know, language that, you know, in history, shared history between the two regions. But, you know, when you look into countries like China or Russia, then it's a completely different thing, because we're not talking about democratic countries. We're talking about completely different political regimes where democracy doesn't stand as, you know, as a basis value. And I think that's where Europe has to stand onto building a very sustainable geopolitical leadership that I think is missing today, to be honest. As much as I think what makes us different is our values, is the fact that we have a certain legislation, because obviously technology is something that you need to control before being controlled by technology. I mean, I see how people can get excited having robots being, you know, CEOs of companies like in China. NetDragon, which is one of the biggest gaming company in China, is led by a robot, a CEO robot. But is that the future that we want for our humanity? Do we want machines to lead us, or do we want to lead machines? So there are a lot of questions that, you know, are put out there. I don't think I have the solutions for Europe. I don't think, you know, this will be the, like, you know, the space where I can give the solutions. Otherwise, you know, why do we have all these people working at the EU? But I think this is the moment that we take this very seriously and actually put together with not only Europe, but also other partners to seriously make sure that we know how to confront these situations when we have China and Russia taking the lead.
Yeah, very interesting. I'd like a robot to do my taxes and my washing up, like it would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, so building on what Sana just said, I think also that trust is one of the most valuable currencies when it comes to the digital economy. But we also need economic realism, as you pointed to, Leonardo, and essentially successful business models will depend on the ability to scale, and for that we need our open data spaces and interoperable standards, and to really signal what we're actually good at here in Europe. And if we're serious about redefining success, as you pointed to, then we also need to measure, well, digital trust, how confident people are in the data, and that their data is safe. But we also need to think about inclusion, about bridging the global digital divide, the digital divide within Europe also, and we need to think about sustainability, essentially the carbon footprint of our digital systems.
So by honing in on our strengths, you think we can attract investment as well, I guess. That's what you're saying.
Well, that's a hope. We need to signal what we're good at, but of course we also need
and pick our battles.
And pick our battles.
Yeah.
Yeah, just on that, sorry to always bring the level of the conversation down, but to me, there is a very concrete thing we need to do now, which is import talent, right? We've been exporting talent and ideas for decades because we don't pay enough, because it's very hard. Earlier today, I was on the phone with a European startup and doing really well. Of course, they're trying to raise a significant amount of money. Where are they forced to go? To the US. They have acquisition offers, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think one of the biggest gifts of the current change in politics, of the US politics, is this tax on talent that was imposed in the form of the H-1B visa being raised to 100K. And a lot of people wanting to leave, the same way that happened with Brexit. We have no plan to repatriate Europeans. We have no plan to take technical talent from India that would like to come from Europe. And sometimes I talk to Americans that want to come and work in Europe, and there is this plan to get them in, but in fact they have to go through 27 different regimes to go through. So when you look at the most innovative companies in the world, and I went from being a civil servant to working for a big tech company, and that's why I need help, but that's a different story. What they over-index on is hiring builders. So all the conversations we have here, and that points to not just a diversity question in gender, but to a generational question, will not be solved unless we have people that can build this stuff, that want to do it here and that can do it here. And so, I mean, a very concrete thing would be give an innovation visa to engineering talent, the equivalent of the O1 in the US. And then you can have this type of conversation. Because if in 10 years you have nobody to build the Internet of Commons, then you're just going to have a nice graph on a poster.
Yeah.
So why don't we, I mean, an innovation visa doesn't sound that complicated, but I'm sure there's hundreds of reasons why it cannot happen.
Migration, ooh.
There are hundreds of reasons not to do it. There's probably one good reason to do it, right? Which is you need builders to build. So I think that's the other technology that is failing us, is institutions, right? Consensus is not a decision-making device. And yet we default to that. So there are some times in history where you cannot compromise. Because in fact, the one thing I don't think we are doing is we're not competing with the US or China. We're competing against our own obsolescence. Because the size of competition between the US or China is objectively outsizing us already. So we just need to decide where we want to restart growth and with which model, or to become a vassal partner to each sphere of influence.
And I would add on to the competition aspect, because we can learn a lot from China, because China is not competing with anyone. In the sense that China had their century of humiliation, and they decided that that will never happen to them again, and so they're going to do their best to become excellent in what they do. If we talk about China in the 90s or even the early 2000s, when we talk about their products, it was always, lower quality. We would think, oh no, that's made in China, so I'm not going to buy it because it doesn't provide value. When we think about China now, we think about immense infrastructural production. We think about high levels of industrial care. We think about their ability to make things move quickly and efficiently. They have an ethic of excellence that we do not have. And I don't think the focus should be on becoming competitive in relation to China or in relation to the US, because I think we should run our race. What do we want to be excellent in? How can we cultivate an ethic of excellence in the now, within our industries, and make sure that we become good in what we're doing and quick at doing it? And instead of focusing, oh my gosh, the US, oh my gosh, I mean, yes, they're viable threats, they are competitors for sure, but that's not the main issue. We're so focused on what other people are doing that we're not focused on how to make ourselves better, because we're so fearful of losing this privilege, that we've gained by being, the colonizing power and for hundreds of years, that we've become complacent with what is required of us to be excellent. And I'm a descendant of enslaved people, so I'm not even talking about that type of domination and that type of innovation, but I'm talking about how can we make things that are beautiful, that make things that mean something to people, and make things that move our society forward. We need to dream bigger, a better dream.
I think I will join the ideas of my two co-speakers. I think here in Europe, it's not like we don't have enough resources. I think that we are puzzled today with different political extremist groups. I would not name one or the other, but I think I'll give the example of Belgium, and then I'll give the example of Singapore. So if you look into the Singapore, it's a new country. I mean, it's like 70-some years old. But one thing that they have done that was super excellent and super interesting, actually, that we can learn from here in Europe, is how they integrated the immigration. I mean, the only thing they have is, human capital. And they have managed to develop, an integration system where every immigrant is given to the country. Here in Europe, and specifically in Belgium, we're very puzzled on how to integrate immigrants. And, Belgians of origin immigrants. Let me remind you that Europe is an old continent. So we have, more older people. And we have, we need tech talent. We are not the continent where there is, the highest, especially here in Belgium. We don't have, the biggest tech talent out there. Like, we outsource. We go to India to look for talent and bring them here. We go to Tunisia, to Morocco, for even for web developers. So this is the reality of things, is that, what is the system we need to actually put in place in order to nurture and actually invest in this talent. So back at the end of the day, technology is a tool. We go to the humans. We need to invest in humans. And I think with the political regime and the political movements and the political ideation that we have so far, I think we're just we're afraid of anything that is external, which is immigrants, although we have a lack of talent locally. So I think that also has a very big impact and effects on actually our production, our improvements, our evolution in the tech sector, which makes us very weak comparing to other countries that actually tap into immigration as an important resource to build, to produce, and to lead. And I think this is an element that is super important for Europe to actually re-evaluate.
Excellent, very good. We have 15 minutes before we finish our panel, and lots of questions, so thank you so much. Let me just read some of them, maybe, and see who wants to take it. So one says, from Eva, do we need to compete on a global level, or rather just design a good European future with values and self-sufficiency? So in other words, forget about Russia and China and just focus on building our values and growing our own tomatoes.
But we are a global village today. I mean, it's very difficult to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to be on the side and I'm going to do my own thing. We depend on each other, let's be honest. I mean, like now with the Trump policy on, export and import, look how it impacted the economy.
I mean, isn't that an argument to be more self-sufficient?
Definitely we should be, but we live in an age where actually we are dependent on each other. And I think this is the moment where it's important. That's why, geopolitically speaking, we need to have really, really objective and well thinkers, who don't have the big ego. And that's why we need more women in leadership to actually sit down and say, okay, where do we want to go with the humanity? Because the humanity doesn't depend on Europe being on the side or US on being on the side. We need each other. We are a global village today. So what's happening, in Africa today is going to impact, what's happening in Europe. I mean, we're talking about viruses, by the way. I mean, Trump's decision to actually stop USAID funding in different countries. I mean, USAID is doing a lot of job in Africa when it comes to viruses. I mean, we are not realizing that tomorrow, if there is any virus that will, just spread in Africa, the first continent or the first region to actually be impacted is Europe. So this shows you how much we are connected and dependent on each other. So this is the moment in history where we actually need a very, very human thinking when it comes to geopolitical leading.
Very good. And
Well, yeah, I fully agree. We are fully interconnected in this world. I think the question really taps into the big question in Brussels right now, which is on technological sovereignty and the fact that we need to do more ourselves, to be able to do more ourselves. I think everyone can agree on that. But we cannot just cut ourselves off from the rest of the world. We are simply not in a position to do that. So yes, we need to be better at what we're doing, but we cannot just ignore the fact that others are doing things and sometimes much better.
Also, when it comes to values, if we're not coherent with the values that we claim to hold, nobody's going to take us serious. Europe's reputation is in shambles. You know, and because we have continuously allowed human rights abuses to happen across the board in the Middle East, in the global south, and we've supported nations that are committing human rights abuses. And everybody knows it. Everyone in leadership knows it too. It's not controversial. But if we want trust to come from partners, and Europe needs minerals, Europe needs immigrants, especially from Africa and from Asia, and they see us as hypocrites and as people that only weaponize rule of law and international human rights law in their own favor. So if we want to build a better Europe, if we want to be competitive, or if we even want to be excellent in what we're doing, we're going to have to reflect on the fact that we are in violation of our own values and course correct. The moment that we start to course correct, we unlock ourselves from the paralysis that we are in right now, because the paralysis that we have exists because we are incoherent within ourselves. We don't know who we are, we don't know where we're going, we don't know what we want. We say what we want, but we do the totally reverse thing, and then we're surprised that, oh my gosh, nothing's going right. No kidding. You know, is it shocking? Am I crazy? Maybe I am, but that's okay.
you paint a rather bleak picture.
No, because there is hope, but hope requires us to recognize the hopelessness of the status quo and the hopelessness of doing the same thing over and over again and rehashing the same conversations. Oh my gosh, this is a wake-up call for Europe. It's been a wake-up call for 20 years. Yo, a moment we got to get up and start moving. We have to shake things up if we want to win. And it's possible if we're willing, but if we're unwilling, we will continue to do this until kingdom come. And then Trump is at the borders of Greenland with military weapons and ships and taking over, and then we're surprised. Well, what do I know, right?
Can I go with another question? From Eileen, thank you so much. When it talks about the real Brussels effect, the question is, would we not get better or more respect from China and others if we had actual charismatic, strong leaders? Do you think we have them, Leonardo?
You're asking me? I think we overestimate the leverage that the system that we built, values, and the rhetoric that we built has on international relations today. I think we live in times of absurdity, and what I mean by that is that the interests of a nation trump the established order. And that's why you see more ambiguous alliances emerge, where you can be at war with some state on one level, but be their trading partner on another level. And certainly, I think that we have a class of leadership that has become too technocratic to interpret the changes that are occurring in the world. And in history, it's inclusive and effective institutions that delivered progress. That's what economics now shows. And so I do think back to the point that there is a generational question that we need to address. one of the things that and some of my students are here, unfortunately for them, but one of the things that I keep on referencing is the world of yesterday. We talked with Anne yesterday about it. Stefan Zweig's biography, completed in 1942. He talked about the sudden crumbling of the Habsburg Empire, right? Because they just couldn't see that they were boiling in water gradually. And part of that, I think, is the fact that there wasn't enough. Innovation and change comes from outsiders. And maybe our institutions, both political and policy, have become too hard to crack into by outsiders. There is not enough refreshment or circulation of talent in them. And so I do think that it comes down to that. I don't know if it's charisma. In the end, there's a lot more than that makes a nation successful. And you should ask yourself whether it's history that makes people or people that make history. But I do think that there is a generational question to make institutions more effective and inclusive.
Very interesting. Gilberto, who is the strong man or women of Europe today?
I don't see him.
No, I think Macron is. I think Macron is actually, like, you can criticize him, you can say a lot of things, but on international, level, geopolitically, I think he is the face of Europe.
I mean, have you seen the pictures? Like, every single picture with Macron and world leaders, it's like, he does ooze charisma for sure, but, I mean, we gotta have, like, a coherence between our policies and the charisma that we have, right? And
it's not about charisma. I think he, like, whether we want it or not, he is the European leader that we see. Like, give me any other European leader, other Macron. I mean, you have him in all different stories, but today it's Macron who's actually there to challenge Trump. I mean, he's so far the one who's challenging Trump. Like, when Trump he tried to humiliate France about the Ukraine situation, he took the lead and said, no, this is not how things are done. Actually, this is not the true version. This is what happens. This is how Europe is leading the Ukrainian.
So I guess to you, leadership should be about spelling out what's happening and how to tackle.
For
issues.
me, I mean, you asked the question about who is the face today, and so I gave the example of Macron because that's who we have at the moment. I'm not saying he's the ideal, but this is the person we have today. But I think indeed Europe needs more, European leaders to actually be there to show that Europe has its stance, and maybe it's going to be with the next woman European leader. Who knows?
we need our own Claudia Sheinbaum, as we were talking about yesterday. Like, I'm a Claudia stan, so.
Very good. This is a question actually specifically for Anne on Denmark. Denmark appears to be gradually distancing itself from US big tech in favor of open weight models. Do you have any insights into whether this has any potential to become a European strategy, given Denmark's influence in tech policy? And if so, how should this shift be understood within the framework of the Brussels Effect 2.0?
Wow, what a question. So
1 minute.
So first of all, I think the Danish approach is still, we cannot just shut ourselves off from US tech, and I don't think that the line is that offensive from Copenhagen side as is portrayed here, but there has been there is quite the sense of urgency that we need to be able to do more ourselves, and we can rely more on open source solutions, but we don't need to cut ourselves off.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, in the last couple of minutes that we have, as I scroll through the questions, I think that we're going to end with the same question for everyone on what do you think is the key characteristic of a Brussels Effect 2.0? In other words, how do we get out of this mess? Leonardo.
Common sense, and that means changing who delivers policy. So we need engineering capacity if you want to manage tech.
So talent, key
talent, import talent, and assign the right talent to the right jobs. Second,
how do we get this talent?
I mean, making it easier to come to Europe, competitive wages, access to capital, These are the things that builders want: networks, dense cities, where innovation.
And how close are we to getting there?
I mean, I think the rhetoric is greater than the actions. I hope we get EU Inc. Next year as a regulation. You know, we make announcements without teeth, so that's what I hope we get. So this scale-up fund, I did a round of calls. There are lots of investment funds that are not completely sure about working with institutions. I think they would be sure if they had people they could recognize from across the table.
Okay, people, and I know you have many others,
Yeah,
but let's
I'll
stay
stay
with
there, yeah.
people.
Transparency and ethic of excellence, a focus on the commons, and coherence with their policies and their actions.
Coherence meaning what, exactly?
Meaning, if we're going to be pro-human rights and international law, then we don't get to just not do it when Israel commits a genocide. You know, shocking. But like these are simple things that we should do, that showcases, especially to the partners where we are importing our products from, where we get our resources from, that this is a serious actor that follows through with what they say, that does not back down when they are threatened, and that is willing to follow through with their agreements, even when it is sometimes inconvenient. Because that also shows to them, you know, oh, these are serious people, and we will also have to follow through, or else there will be consequences.
Excellent.
I would say political leadership. I think this is the thing that is missing in Europe. I mean, if you look to Brussels, we still don't have government in Brussels. And that shows how weak you know, the country is becoming more and more.
Yet it still functions perfectly well.
I mean, perfectly, I would not say so. But we don't have government to take leadership, to take decision today in Brussels. We are almost bankrupt, so that reflects on actually, you know, the impact in the next few years, like 10 years and more. And then investment. You mentioned this, I think it's very important.
Yes.
Coming to womanpreneur, being trained in tech, it's space too. But I think in general, I think this is something that is missing in Europe, is that we don't have that culture of say, okay, I'm going to invest in this startup. I'm going to take that risk. It's okay, but I'm going to do it. Look at the example of Belgium. We have more than 500,000 multimillionaires, who are actually, most of them, they inherited money from, you know, family business. What would have happened if each person actually invests in a local startup? We're going to have a booming economy. We're going to be able to actually export talent and bring talent to Belgium. The right talent, the talent we need for you know, for our economy. And I think we have so a conservative kind of, you know, investment mentality that does not push our economy to go beyond what it is. So I'm a big believer in Brussels. I'm a big believer in Belgium. We are in the heart of Europe, and I think we have not been named the heart of Europe for nothing. So I have a positive, you know, view on it. I think this is just a phase, and I think Europe is going to see that, you know, we need to change direction. But again, the heart of all of this is the human capital. If we do not invest in the human capital, we're going to be losing.
Yeah. Investing in what we're good at, including human capital, shaping the rules of the game, being present in multilateral discussions, in standard-setting organizations, also absolutely key, and leveraging trust.
Excellent. Okay, so people, money, follow through, leadership, being present, highlighting what we're good at.
And human capital.
And human capital. Just that. Okay, on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you.